Every story has a beginning, every machine has a history, and the bicycle is not an exception. This is a history video on who invented the bicycle. Vehicles with two tires started appearing as early as the 19th century. Balance of the rider was needed for movement to be made. The earliest prototype of a modern-day bicycle dates back to 1817. It was made in Germany. Then it was not called a bicycle. It was called the Drazen. The term bicycle was first used in 1860. It was coined by the French. It was called penny farthing in the UK. Penny farthings had wheels that were really high and huge, especially the wheels in the front. The huge size of the wheel was very vital though. Due to the fact that riders then traveled far distances, they wanted something that could cover a lot of distance in less time. Therefore, the wheels were made to be huge and large, so that every pedaling would send the tire covering a lot of distance. It was also necessary to have huge wheels at that time because the wheels absorb shock better. The penny farthing became outdated in the 1880s when modern bicycles started arriving the scene. A marked difference was that these new bicycles had gear trains that were driven by chains. Also, another selling point that the modern bicycle had was they were named safety bicycles. This was because the height from which one could fall off was drastically reduced. The name penny farthing was coined by the British. They had pennies that were large and farthings that were small. So, if you place them side by side and looked at their side view, you will see that they did look like the penny and farthing bicycles, with the big wheel leading the smaller one. Those bicycles are referred to as penny and farthing now in retrospect. Back then, when they were popular, they were not called penny and farthing. In fact, the earliest time one saw penny and farthing being used to refer to a bicycle was in 1891. It was in a newspaper, Bicycling News. By then the bikes had lost their status to modern bikes. What those bikes were referred to as in their days were ordinary bicycles. Unverified claims about who invented the bicycle. There are a lot of claims as to who invented the bicycle. Most of them are unverified and may be false. There is a small sketch from 1500 AD which is said to have been drawn by Gian Caprati. He was a student of Da Vinci. However, Lessing Hans Erhard refuted the claim and called it intentional fraudulence in the year 1998. Nevertheless, many adherents of Augusto Marioni believe the sketch. Marioni is a philologist and a lexicographer. He was the one authorized by Commission Vinciana in Rome to transcribe what Da Vinci wrote in his Codex Atlanticus. Some years after the claim mentioned above was made, another claim was made which was also unverified. A certain de Sivrac created celerifer in the year 1792. He showed off his invention in the Royal Palace of France. The celerifer was stationed on double wheels. The wheels were set of wooden frames that were rigid and had no steering. The direction of the vehicle was controlled by leaning to the side the rider wanted it to go. It was said that a rider would sit astride and make the machine move along with alternate feet. Many historians think that this is false and that there was never any vehicle like that ever. They think the whole machine and its description was due to an error by a popular French journalist, Louis de Saunier-Bandry in the year 1891. Development in the 19th century. It was in this century that claims started gaining traction because there were means to verify these claims. Von Dries Karl, a German, was the first person to invent a type of bicycle. He was the civil servant of the Baden's Duke in Germany. Laufmaschine was what his invention was called. It was invented in the year 1817. The Laufmaschine meant running machine in English. In England, however, it was called Dreisnine. In France, it was called Draisien, especially by the media. Von Dries had his design patented. Just the next year, 1818, the very first commercially available bicycle was invented. It was a success in the market. It had two wheels as well as a steering for direction. It was human-propelled. The name of the machine was Velocipede. However, it was given a nickname, Dandy Horse, or Hobby Horse. The first places it was manufactured were France and Germany. Hans Erhard, the man who wrote the biography of Dries, found the reason why Dries invented the bicycle. He was looking for an alternative to horses. It was in the year 1816, a terrible year for Germany. There was severe crop failures. Horses could not feed, they were dying of starvation. The crop failure year was named, Year Without Summer. The crop failure was caused by a volcanic eruption that happened in Tambora in the year 1815. Dries was the first person who rode the velocipede. This was on the 12th of June 1817. He rode from Mannheim. He went a total distance of 13 kilometers or 8 miles. And this was within an hour. The vehicle was comprised majorly of wood. Drazen had a weight of 48 pounds or 22 kilogram. Wheel bearings came with brass bushings inside of them. Wheels were made of iron shod and there was a brake in the rear wheel. The space between the front and back wheel was 6 inches or 152 millimeters. Many people loved what he designed. It was well received by the mechanical world. Soon, many people started reproducing his model and selling it. His model was very popular in the northern part of America and Western Europe. However, it did not take long for the popularity to wane. Why? Because people had many crashes using his bicycle and many authorities outlawed the use of his bike because of this. It was not totally outlawed though, because, in the year 1866, a Chinese by name Bin Chun paid a visit to Paris, France. He still saw people who were using velocipedes which were pushed by foot. Dries' idea didn't die totally because his idea was taken by some British cartwrights. Chief among them was Johnson Dennis, from London. He announced in the year 1818 that he'd make a modernized version. When Johnson produced his, another name was given to it. Some called it the pedestrian curricle. Few still called it the velocipede. But a vast majority of the public loved calling it a hobby horse. This was in jest of how it looked like a toy for children. The machine that Johnson made was of course better than that of Dries. It was first of all more elegant and good looking. His frame was made of wood just like Dries, but he was shaped like a snake. Dries was straight. The serpentine shape of the frame made it possible for large wheels to be used on the bike without affecting the height of the rider's seat. When the summer of the year 1819 arrived, hobby horse became a sensation. What helped was that Johnson was a smart and skillful marketer. He also had patent protection that was strong. London became abuzz with his machine that year. Regency's Corinthians and the dandies adopted the bike. It even featured in the poem of a popular poet Keats John. In his poem, he called it the Nothing. The trend of course did not last long because people who rode the bike found out that it wore their boots out easily. Not long after then, those who rode the bike on sidewalks or pavements had to pay £2 as fine. No matter the level and how well bikes are today, they owe their basis to Dries. It was his model that has been improved on. It was Dries who inspired a certain Frenchman to create pedals and cranks for the hub of the wheel in front in 1863. That set the precedent for the new bikes that we now see these days. The 1830s. Kirkpatrick Macmillan, a Scottish blacksmith, was said to have invented the first mechanically propelled vehicle. The vehicle had 2 wheels and was made in the year 1839. In 1850, Sawyer Willard of Dover designed a vehicle with 4 wheels and treadle operated. He exported them to many countries abroad. The first person who is said to have started making 2-wheeled vehicles which are rod-driven treadle bicycles was Thomas McCall. He was from Kil Marn Mach and he made the bicycle in the year 1869. The velocipedes were also the main source of inspiration. Boneshaker, velocipede, and 1860s. The bicycle was made in the year 1863 and was popular from 1868 to 1870. The make of the bike was much simpler than Macmillan bike. The bike made use of pedals and rotary cranks which were fixed at the nub of the wheel in front. The pedaling allowed for cyclists to move the bike at various speeds. But there was a limit one could go on the bike. The bike was criticized for not being safe and stable. The makers had to make the bike wheels look like that of penny and farthing. Another shortcoming was that it was hard to use the pedal. This pedal was also used to steer the bike. On the other hand, the metal frames were very smooth and design was very elegant. The English nicknamed the velocipede as Boneshaker. This was due to its frame that was rigid, wheels that were iron-banded. These made the riders experience body shakes when they were on the bike. In the United States, the very first patent was recorded in 1866. That design could be pedaled. The drawing Lallement showed as evidence looked just like Dries, with pedals. In 1860, a certain blacksmith Pierre Michaud started making bicycle parts to sell and encourage the carriage business. In 1865, the two Oliver brothers, René and Amy, traveled 8 days on the bike, from Paris on to Avignon. They were impressed by the machine and the sheer potential, so they decided to start making one. The Oliver joined forces with Georges Boulisset and Pierre Michaud. The company was called Michaud et Cie. The Oliver brothers refused using their family name so they could stay low-key in case the business fails. They were the premier company that started making bikes in commercial quantity. Their bikes replaced the wooden frame design of Dries. Theirs had a cast iron frame. Asides this difference, every other machine that the Michaud made looked like the drawing of Lallemant's patent. With a good mechanic who was called Gabert, Amy Oliver in Lyon made another improvement on bicycle frames. The material was made from wrought iron, which was stronger than the previous cast design. There was a reason why this change was made. Velocipede was expensive stuff back then and could only be purchased by the rich. So, when people began to buy the Michaud, they complained that the frame, made of cast iron and serpent-like in shape, broke easily. The Michaud knew that they had to upgrade or risk falling while their competitors took over. So, they had to act fast in replacing the cast iron. The wrought iron design was no longer serpentine in shape, rather it was diagonal in shape. Just like the ones Michaud competitions made. This upgrade meant that the company would dominate the bicycle industry for many years. On the streets of Paris, which had macadam and paved boulevards, it felt easy riding the bicycles there. Most of the bicycles in France were still making use of the horse and coach technology. In fact, bicycles were still named velocipede. On the other hand, the Americans called it boneshaker. Improvements on the bicycles saw tires made of rubber being added, ball bearings were also added. Lallemant had to leave Paris in the year 1865. He transversed the Atlantic Ocean and made his home in America, Connecticut to be precise. There he got the patent for his velocipede. This led to the growth of other related inventions. Patents began to increase in America. From the year 1868 to 1869, the fame of bicycles increased in both Europe and the Americas. In essence, the velocipede became a base on which other bicycles sprung from. It gave others the confidence to make their own bicycle and sell. This was a good thing because competition led to the innovation and advancement of the machine. Franco-Prussian Battle of the 1870s had a fatal effect on the bicycle trade in France. The boneshaker, in the US, was only famous for a little amount of time. Historians have dissenting opinions as to why the boneshaker failed. However, most of them agreed that it was because the roads in America were too bad, worse than the roads in Europe. This made riding in the United States of America difficult. Lallemant's patent was bought by Calvin Whitty. But the demand that was made for royalty was so much that it made the company to crumble. The United Kingdom was the place where bicycles, its fame, and use did not completely die off no matter what. We'd draw the curtain here for this video. Kindly check the next post for the second part of Who Invented the Bicycle. If you've enjoyed this video, click the subscribe button below and hit the notification bell so you'll know once we post a new video. Also, drop a comment below so we can know your thoughts. Finally, don't forget to check the description below for more details and visit our site, www.zimbike.com for more awesome bicycle content like this.